From pigeon-guided missiles and bats dropping bombs, to sneaky spy cats and dogs of war, here are 14 amazing animals drafted for military service. Number 14. Messenger pigeons. Thanks to their homing abilities and navigational skills, these birds have carried messages for humans for ages. They especially made a name for themselves during World War I, when 200,000 of the animals were used by the Allied forces. One famous pigeon named Cher Ami was even decorated with the French Cross of War for delivering a dozen messages in Verdun, France. This bird was credited with saving the US Lost Battalion, which had been trapped by US troops. When Allied soldiers had to maintain radio silence on D-Day, they used pigeons to relay messages. Due to advances in communications technologies, the birds were eventually retired from military service. But the armed forces found some other uses for the pigeons, which we'll talk about shortly. Number 13. Cattle command. Even these beasts have been used as instruments of war, although the results have been mixed. While herds of the stampeding bovines can crush an enemy, they can also deliver a type of friendly fire. In the Battle of Tondibi in West Africa during the 16th century, the Songhai Empire sent 1,000 cattle charging at the Moroccan infantry. The tactic had been successful against enemies that had no firearms, but the Moroccans did. Their guns spooked the cattle, who charged back against the Songhai army. They not only lost the battle, they also lost control of their empire. Number 12. Bees. Along with other civilizations, the ancient Greeks and Romans were known to use the small insects as a way to discourage enemy troops. When provoked, angry bees can become a potent weapon, so attacking forces would often catapult beehives over city walls. The inhabitants would sometimes return the favour by barraging the invading forces with their own hives. Angry bees were also used during castle sieges in the Middle Ages. In modern warfare, they were used throughout the Vietnam War. More recently, scientists have trained bees to detect landmines. Number 11. Scorpion bombs. What's worse than being attacked by angry bees? How about being bombarded with scorpions? In 198 AD, the Romans mounted an attack on the city of Hatra, which was located in modern-day Iraq. The city's inhabitants filled clay pots with the angry arachnids and hurled them down on the invading Romans. The animals fell on the soldiers' eyes and stung all of the unprotected parts of their bodies. That, along with the hot climate and disease within the ranks, convinced the Romans to end the siege. How did the city dwellers manage to handle the scorpions? They spit on the creature's tail, which allegedly immobilized them long enough to be picked up. Number 10. Camels. Today, only a few armies use these animals for mounted patrols. But at one time, camel cavalries flourished in various regions of the world, especially in North Africa and the Middle East in ancient times. They were even conscripted for use by the US cavalry in the mid-1800s. Their ability to withstand harsh climates and needing little water made them valuable assets. And while they didn't present the most fearsome sight when charging, their smell was offensive enough to frighten enemy horses. Ancient Persians equipped their camels with elaborate armor and used them as heavy cavalry. But outside of their natural range, horses were far more favored over camels as battle mounts. Through the 19th century, the development of guns severely reduced the need for camels in combat. But they did see action during World War I with Arab forces and British General T.E. Lawrence, who might be more familiar as Lawrence of Arabia. Number 9. Pigeon missiles. Like we mentioned earlier, one of the best known military uses for pigeons is relaying messages. But the noted behaviourist B.F. Skinner once devised Project Pigeon. It was a plan for training pigeons to ride in missiles and guide them to enemy targets. The missiles contained an array of lenses in front that projected a picture of the target on an interior screen. The birds were trained to peck at the image on screen, and that corrected the missile's flight plan. After automated guidance systems were proven effective in the 1950s, the Pigeon project was cancelled. Number 8. RATS. That's the acronym for a military program which stands for Rugged Automated Training System, but it also applies to the rodents. In 2012, the US Army developed this program to see how effectively the animals could locate bombs. The Army says that using the critters in such a manner is a way to exploit their intelligence, and their small size would allow them to access smaller areas that are inaccessible to larger animals and humans. Number 7. Sea lions. The US Navy's Marine Mammal Program, NMMP, was established in 1960 to research the feasibility of using those animals for military purposes. In particular, the program focused on dolphins and sea lions, which are known to possess extraordinary underwater hearing. Also, with those keen ears, sea lions can dive up to 1,000 feet deep, 305 meters, and swim as fast as 25 miles per hour, that's 40 kilometers per hour. Those abilities made them strong choices as minesweepers. The animals have also received training that allows them to attach specialized restraining cuffs onto the legs of suspect saboteurs. That allows the suspect to be captured and hauled to the service. After being harnessed with cameras, sea lions can also be used for conducting searches for objects on the ocean floor. In that regard, it's said that a single sea lion is more efficient than a naval vessel with full crew. Number 6. Dogs of war. Humans have enlisted the abilities of dogs on the battlefield for several millennia. Various breeds have been trained for sentry duty by cultures ranging from the ancient Greeks to Native Americans. The Roman Empire equipped their dogs with spiked collars and armor and arranged them into attack formations. Spanish conquistadors outfitted their attack dogs in armor while they were colonizing South America during the 1500s. In the modern era, dogs are more typically used as scouts, trackers, and messengers. The Royal Air Force, RAF, has trained police dogs for decades for detecting bombs and drugs. Did you know that Great Danes and Mastiffs were used in England during the Middle Ages to scare horses into throwing off their riders? Once they were dislodged, the dogs held them until their master arrived to finish off the enemy. Number 5. Horses. Experts say that horses were first domesticated by humans around 5,500 years ago in present-day Kazakhstan. As horses spread across Eurasia, they were soon used in large-scale warfare. The use of the horse-drawn chariot enabled ancient Egyptian and Chinese warriors to fight from a stable platform. After the invention of the saddle and stirrup, mounted warriors held a decided advantage in combat. A good example is armoured knights on horseback that could plough through and devastate squads of enemy foot soldiers. Mongols were able to fight and effectively shoot arrows while on horseback, enabling them to conquer much of the known world. The use of equines was curtailed once tanks and machine guns became staples of modern warfare. But the image of horses thundering across the battlefields still evokes a powerful symbol of conquering armies. Number 4. Elephants of war. As befits Earth's largest living land mammals, they have delivered devastating consequences for enemy forces. It's thought that the behemoths were first trained for use in warfare in ancient India, but the practice of using them as living tanks quickly spread to the Middle East. At certain times, the Romans, Greeks, and Carthaginians made use of war elephants. In 218 BC, Hannibal famously used war elephants as his army crossed the Alps into Italy to face down the Romans. Since they could trample soldiers, pierce them with their tusks, and carry archers and javelin throwers, it's no wonder the pachyderms were favoured in warfare. Just the sight of the enormous animals was enough to gain a psychological victory over enemies. But if they took excessive punishment, elephants could go mad with fear or pain. Their role in combat was effectively ended by the introduction of the cannon to the battlefield. Number 3. Bat bombers. During the Second World War, the US military came up with a bizarre plan to use bats as living bombs. Tiny incendiary bombs were attached to the flying mammals, which would be placed in a container and dropped from a US warplane. As the bats were released to search for a roosting spot, they would set fires across enemy cities. President Franklin D. Roosevelt approved the program at a cost of $2 million. The Navy spent more than that, as it used more than 6,000 bats in trial runs. Most of the subjects proved uncooperative or simply flew off and disappeared. After the bats set fire to an army hangar and a general's car, the project was abandoned. Number 2. Spy cats. In the 1960s, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, decided to use the sneaky abilities of cats to spy on Soviet and Kremlin embassies. Project Acoustic Kitty involved a subject cat being implanted with a microphone into its ear canal. A veterinary surgeon also implanted a tiny radio transmitter at the base of the skull and a thin wire in its fur which served as an antennae. The contraption was powered by a battery placed in the animal's chest, but if you have a cat, you know they're difficult to train. After several unsuccessful trials, the project was terminated in 1967 at an estimated cost of $20 million. At the time, the project was hailed as a remarkable scientific achievement, but it was later written off as a total loss. Number 1. Dolphins. Like we mentioned earlier, the US Navy Marine Mammal Program studies the abilities of animals for their use in the military. We covered sea lions earlier, so let's finish up with a look at bottlenose dolphins. In addition to patrolling the waters, they're able to locate mines by using their sophisticated sonar, which is more powerful than its artificial counterpart. They can also help to capture unauthorized human swimmers by bumping a device into the enemy's air tank. An attached buoy explodes and alerts the Navy to the intruder's presence. Given their keen intelligence, many people have speculated that dolphins could be weaponized and trained to attack humans. The Navy claims that dolphins cannot discern between friendly forces and allied forces, so attack missions are impractical. They say that the animals are trained to detect all swimmers and mines within a designated area. Then they report back to their human handler, who determines the appropriate response. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that big red subscribe button and click the bell for notifications for our next exciting episode right here on Epic Wildlife.